Hey everyone, this is Matt, and in today's video, I'll be doing a recap of my most recent weekend's locals experience. So I've briefly mentioned locals in my other videos, basically ever since I built my Dark Magician deck profile after Battle Chaos. I've been going to locals. I've attended 4 locals tournaments so far. The first 2 I went, and I already talked about. I got top 4 in both of them. Using the same deck profile that I showcased in my deck profile video, with the exception of that one, the couple changes that I mentioned. Like I had Timaeus in the first locals, which I took out for the second locals, and then I had double Ice Dragon's Prison aside, which I swapped out for 2 Cosmic Cyclones. It was interesting. And then last week I put out a video talking about some of the side deck tech options and alternative tech options. So like if you don't like my 10 trap lineup, then I gave you some alternatives to what you can run. So this last weekend I attended 2 locals tournaments, and this time I used some of the new tech options that I showcased in my last video with a few minor changes. But let's talk about these 2 tournaments. So the first tournament was a world qualifier event that my locals held, which basically meant that whoever gets top 4 in the tournament receives an invitation to the World Championship, right? So unfortunately, I got top 8 of that tournament. Was not able to get top 4. I was 1 win away from getting to top 4. My opponent in the top 8 to top 4 match was he got an extremely good hand. Like game 1, I did win the die roll, but he just got a cracked hand with like 3 hand traps and 3 unique hand traps and like a full combo board. And then in game 2, my going first, my board was okay, but he also got kind of lucky with his starting hand. Anyway, and then in the second tournament, I actually finished top 2. But in that tournament where I finished top 2, I did not, it didn't have the stakes of like getting an invitation to the World Championship. So one might say probably less competitive. Anyway, I want to talk about the tech options that I use. So I didn't quite use exactly what I mentioned in my last video. So I actually ran, these are the 10 card slots that I ran, that I said that were flexible. These were what I ran. So in the last video, I think I mentioned that I was gonna try running 3 Chalice, 2 Super Poly, 2 Droll, and it was supposed to be 3 Imperms, right? However, I ended up, after playtesting online, I felt like 3 Chalice, 3 Imperms was a little overkill. Like, um, these cards aren't that high impact, like, to justify running basically 6 copies of it. Like, I don't know, it just felt like it just did too little, right? So after playtesting online, I did definitely found that Chalice was better than Imperm because it was more flexible. Because I mean, the point of these is like when I'm going second, right? Like if I lose a die roll in game 1 and I go second, I'd rather have Chalices than Imperms, because it helps me deal with the opponent's board more likely. So what I ended up doing was I ended up cutting those imperms and going back to the triple skill drain. And I really, really like this decision. Triple skill drain, honestly, should be core to the Dark Magician deck. Like I kind of want to go out on a limb and say, similar to Eldritch, like you should not play a Dark Magician deck without 3 of these in your main deck. Like it's just such a good card. Every time skill drain comes up, either me going first or second, I win. Like it's nuts how good of a card this is. I would even say like the only real tech options or side deck slots I have are these because like skill drain is just such a staple. But yeah, you can side deck out skill drain for like summon limiter or something else if you prefer. All right, so how was my experience with these cards? So of these tech options, Chalice was the least whelming. It was the most underwhelming of the choices. Um, I can only think of like maybe once or twice tops where Chalice like did something interesting that I couldn't think of like another card doing. Where it just like um, I think one time was like I was against an adventure of Phantom Knights. I go second. I hard play Red Ice Fusion, right? And then I put my Dragoon on the field, and he has DPE. I don't know, Bardies, some other cards, right? Like DP and something else. I forget what the rest was. But then he uses, I try to activate Dragoon to pop DPE with his effect, and he chains Droplet on my turn, and then negates Dragoon's effect, right? And then because Dragoon is negated, it can now be targeted and destroyed by card effects. So like he attempts to use DP to pop Dragoon. So he activates Dragoon's effect, his DP's effect. I chain Chalice on his DPE, so that way he cannot pop my Dragoon, and then Droplet wears off at the end of the turn, and then I'm good to go for in the following turn. So yeah, that was one time where Chalice made a decent difference. Let me see the other time. Uh, let me see. It's not even. Yeah, I think that was the most memorable. There was one other time, but it wasn't even that memorable. But the point is, like, I really felt that this card was underwhelming. Not to say that I would cut it. I will say, like, I did not see very many Phantom Knights. Sorry, I did not see very many Scythe decks when I played. I saw a lot of Adventure Prank Kids. A lot of Adventure Prank Kids this last weekend. Definitely the most popular deck now. People finally realizing. I still believe that Adventure Prank Kids is the most broken deck right now. The most consistent, best utilizes the Adventure engine, and they don't really run Scythe. So, um, yeah, but if I did see more Scythe, maybe I would say like, oh, this Chalice came in clutch. Another way Chalice can come in clutch, which I didn't see, is like against Tri Brigade, if they summon Shureg on your turn and they attempt to like banish on target banish, you just chain Chalice and negate the Shureg. Like, that's another usage I can think of where Chalice can come in clutch. Yeah, so this is mainly for the Scythe, but I don't know. I felt like I didn't see enough Scythes, and like with 3 copies of Chalice, I often did see 2 in my hand, and it was fine. But I do think that maybe I would drop a Chalice for a third Droll Lock Bird. Droll Lock Bird was a much higher impact card than Chalice. So, alright, so let's talk about the other one. So, yeah, Chalice, I would say either drop to 2 or just drop completely. Skill Drain, I would say almost every game I had this, I won. Like, it was, I even remember playing against a Prank Kids player who was, hilariously enough, like, main decking 3 Skill Drain, right? So I was against a Prank Kids player, main decking 3 Skill Drain, and then I ended up beating, because he had Totally Awesome, right, like in his extra deck, and Totally Awesome can totally play against around Skill Drain, right, and a lot of the Prank Kids monsters can too, like they get themselves off the field, right, especially like Battle Butler contribute itself, but yeah, and he flipped Skill Drain, I'm like, I'm perfectly okay just summoning a vanilla Dark Magician over and over and just beating you down, or like using Eternal Soul and the Circle Banish, like Dark Magician decks can very, very easily play with Skill Drain. You don't need Dragoon to be like your one block. And even the games where I had Dragoon and Skill Drain, it's a 3K beater that you're not getting over. And you might say, oh, doesn't Dragoon become vulnerable to like card effects now because it can be targeted? Yes. But it was funny. Like one time I had Dragoon Skill Drained on my field, and then they try to target Dragoon with some card effect, I think to like bounce or something, and I had this in my hand, and I don't know if you recall, Ceravis can be discarded to the graveyard to negate an effect that targets a monster on your field. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, so this can protect Dragoon from targeted card effects, and of course you also have another yet again an MVP card, Apprentice Illusion Magician. Apprentice Illusion Magician is so good. Um, like every locals I've been to, she's been phenomenal. Like either protecting Dragoon from being attacked over by a 3500 Battle Butler, or like you know, or if I've been skill drained, right, or even just having Dark Magician. Like I remember this one game, my opponent had like a Zeus, right, and I normal summon Rod, and I had this in my hand, right. And I'm just like, enter battle phase, right? No other cards on the field, right? He has a Zeus with like, I don't know, maybe it was 4 materials, who knows, right? Um, but it's just funny because really thought I was trying to bait his Zeus like effect. He's like, oh, I'm not gonna use Zeus effect to send a lonely magician's rod to the graveyard. Like, what is this, right? Little does he know, I declared an attack on Zeus, And then I'm like, anything on declaration? Nope. So he did not want to activate Zeus effect. He really thought I was baiting him, right? And then, oh, damage calc? 2,000, baby. Like, two, Rob becomes 3,600, beats over Zeus. And for those of you who don't know, if you're like Yugi boomers like me, or like you came back to, or you're not as competitive, this card activates in the damage calculation step, right? So the way battle works is like, you have battle phase, and then within that you declare an attack, and then within that you have the damage step, and then within the damage step you have damage calculation, right? So damage calculation is the most inner step or phase of the battle phase, right? And what people don't realize is that there's only a few effects that you're allowed to activate during the damage calculation. One of them is effects that, uh, like quick effects that increase the attack or defense of a monster, like in combat, right? So like Apprentice Illusion, right? And another is quick effects that negate those cards, right? But most other quick effects cannot be activated. So you cannot activate Zeus's effect in the damage calculation step. You just can't, right? So as soon as I damage calculation, drop this, his Zeus literally was unable to respond. He cannot chain Zeus to send my field to the graveyard, right? Like, this card is so good, like, and it's a one of, right? But it's so searchable because of Servant and like Illusion of Chaos that like it's so easy to get this in your hand now. And honestly, like, if you're running a Dark Magician profile and you want to run 2 or 3 of these, go for it. Like, this card is so good. It's unbelievable how good this card is. Another thing they can't activate in the damage step or damage calculation. Call by the Grave. So this is a battle phase hand trap, because you send it to the graveyard for cost. They cannot call by the grave you. Please be smart. If they try to chain Call by the Grave on a Apprentice Illusion, you say, no, you cannot use Call by the Grave during the damage calculation. It can't happen, right? So make sure you know that. This cannot be stopped by Call by the Grave. So, very important. So, yeah. So, Apprentice Illusion, still an MVP card. Super MVP card. Yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention about Chalice is, I feel like this doesn't do much against prank kids. Like, maybe use this to just bait the Griffin negate or to like give Battle Butler. But I really felt like this was underwhelming. But so enough to I would probably cut this to 2, and maybe not all the way. All right, so Skill Drain was amazing. Chalice was super underwhelming. But yeah, Skill Drain was, ooh, I love this card. It's so good, worth every penny. These are the Lost Arts. Like, I paid a premium price for these, and it was 100% worth. So yeah, I would say don't cut these. They're good going first or second, like blind in game 1, right? All right, let's talk about Droll and Super Poly. So these were very interesting. And the reason for that is, let's move these aside. Okay, so Droll can probably bump up to 3 simply because, if I drop a Chalice, like, Droll probably 3. I really feel like we're in a meta where there's a lot of searching going on, especially when you consider the Adventure engine, which a lot of decks are running, is literally an engine that searches, right? They banish the Water Enchantress, which searches right, activates Fateful Venture. Fateful Venture searches Griffin, and then Fateful Venture searches Draco back, right? But if they activate their Water Enchantress and you Droll, they cannot get Griffin or Draco back this turn, right? So just that by itself, like, just shuts off the engine, right? You're against Phantom Knights, you're against Prank Kids, or any deck with Adventure. Like, usually the Adventure stuff comes first. This will shut them down, right? Yeah, I remember using Droll against a Phantom Knights player who did just that. They used Water Enchantress to get the right out, and then I rolled them, and then they just had like what a useless adventure token that is, I guess, just like a 2K beater, and because they were locked out of searching, like a lot of their Phantom Knights combos like couldn't fully go through either. So they just ended on a super suboptimal board with like the biggest threat was DPE, right? And I'm like, oh, I can deal with DPE, no problem, right? So yeah, Droll is amazing. I originally thought about citing these in because I remember seeing a lot of Drytron and Dragon Link players at my locals, but I ended up not really seeing them this last weekend. I think there was one Dragon Link player in the entire tournament. I think I played him. I beat him, right? And Droll didn't even come up. I just didn't draw it. But like, yeah, I feel like Dragon Link and Drytron people are definitely moving away from. Finally, they're realizing that Drytron sucks and that Dragon Link is not that good. But despite that, this still came in and this still came in handy pretty well. The only issue is like if you bump this up to 3 and you open 2 of them, you can only draw them once, but you could say that like this can be a normal summon. Like there was a time when there was a game where I normal summoned Droll and special summoned Souls and then went into Anaconda. So this is a body, like an effect monster, like a body on the field that can go into Anaconda. Yeah, worst case is just a monster, has an effect, right? And it's, as I mentioned in my last video, it's a spellcaster, so if you have Seeker's Dark Magic, you can make the Dark Magicians, right? So yeah, I can see myself bumping up Droll to 3. Um, and against Fluanderies, this just ends their turn immediately. Like, Fluanderies needs their searches, especially early game, unless they started with all the cards they needed, which is unlikely. But yeah, Droll's amazing. So I can see myself bumping this up to 3. Super Poly. Super Poly was probably the most MVPest of MVP cards, more than any of these other cards. And I only ran 2 copies. Every time I saw Super Poly, used it, resolved it, I won. Like, there was not a single game where this was a useless card. I played a Lyraless player, like a pure bird up player, where I'm like, oh shit, what am I gonna use Super Poly for? All their birds are all their monsters are like wing beasts with wind. Like, what am I gonna use Super Poly for, right? Super Poly does nothing against that. I found a usage for it. They went into one of the games. They went into Assemble Nightingale. Attack me directly, and then they want to go into Zeus, right? So they want to make a 4 material Zeus. So, main phase 2, they summon Downer Magician with the intention of going into Zeus later. Downer Magician, if you didn't know, is a dark monster. So I flipped Super Poly on summon of Downer Magician, fused my Anaconda with his Downer Magician to make I think it was Starving Venom Fusion, but like. Yeah, so even though you would think, oh, this is not useful at all, like against Bird Up, like, yeah, I cited it out game 2 and 3, but I still found a way to use it that was super, super useful. I stopped the Zeus play, right? And like, if he attempted to make Zeus another way, like his Downer Magician is gone. He cannot make a 4 material Zeus anymore unless he like stacked one of his birds with like 3 materials, which is possible, but it's just a lot harder, right? Than just doing 2 birds, Downer Magician, on a Nightingale, Downer Magician, right? Yeah, this card was amazing. Like, I remember playing through a Phantom Knight, an Adventure Phantom Knight board with Super Poly, where, oh man, it was crazy. He had DPE, he had Griffin, right, with the Adventure token. He had, what was it? He had double Fogblade, right? And he had a Ghost Ogre in hand, which I didn't know about. But yeah, I played through all that thanks to Super Poly. One thing that people don't realize, and maybe some people do, Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, which, by the way, I made fusing DPE and Bardiche. So I Super Poly'd DPE with Bardiche because it's funny. And I made Starving Venom Fusion. The reason I made Starving Venom Fusion is because Starving Venom Fusion is against, I could have made Dragos Tapelia, right? So just go over the trade-offs of these, right? So you can Super Poly, DP, and Bardiche into either of these, right? I went with Starving Venom Fusion in this case because it's 2800 attack, so it's 100 more, but that's not the main issue. When this is summoned, you basically gain attack equal to the attack of one of their monsters. So basically, because they had a Griffin on the field, I gained 2,000 attack. So this became 4,800. 4,800 means I can attack over the defense mode Griffin. Griffin has a 2,800 defense, right? And if this monster is destroyed by a card effect, like you activate its effect in the graveyard to destroy like all your opponent's special summon monsters. So meanwhile, this card here just has like a negate, like you put a counter, right? So because I was going second, like this Starving Venom was slightly more useful, and it helped me break the board more, right? Anyway, so yeah, Starving Venom Fusion is great, but the thing I wanted to mention that's, another reason, The reason I want to bring this up, and another reason why this one isn't so good, if you read what it says here on Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, it says, come on, unblur, come on, Dragon Fusion Effect, right? Whereas this says um, Plant Fusion Effect, right? Guys, this is a dragon, an effect dragon, which means if you have Secrets of Dark Magic, which in that game I did, you can literally fusion summon you can fuse Dark Magician, Starving and Fuse Dragon into Dragoon, right? So yeah, it's funny. I baited his I baited so much. I got rid of his EPE. I summoned. I was able to use Magician's Souls to summon Dark Magician, and then Timaeus, right? Timaeus happened to point to the Griffin, so like, um, I try, in battle phase, I try to use Starving Venom to attack the Griffin. He used Fog Blade on Starving Venom. I use Imduck to attack uh, the Griffin, which, activated his effect to pop, right? So eventually I was able to get rid of the freaking Griffin, right? I had like multiple threats, right? But this guy got frozen by Starving Venom uh Fog Blade, right? And then this guy got destroyed. But I did have so in my hand I had a Soul Servant and I had um a Secrets of Dark Magic. And basically what I did was like main phase 2, use Soul Servant to grab Dark Magician, and then Secrets of Dark Magic fuses Starving Venom Fusion on the field that had the Fog Blade on it with the Dark Magician in my hand to make, you guessed it, the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, baby. Yes. So you can fuse Dark Magician Starving Venom Fusion into the Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which is exactly what I did in that Adventure Phantom Knights matchup. So, yeah, Super Poly was amazing. Like, not only that, other instances of Super Poly. I used Super Poly twice against Adventure Prank Kids. Recall that one of the fusion targets I recommended in my last video is this guy right here, Weather Washer. Weather Washer is a fusion of any two Prank Kids monsters. So like in 2 games, I fused Battle Butler with Doodle Doo to make this guy. Bam, done. His board cleared, right? Like this card is amazing. Actually, that's not true. So in 1 game, I fused Battle Butler and Doodle Doo. In a second game, I fused Doodle Doo and the dog, Bow Wow or whatever it's called, right? To make this guy. Yeah, it was so good. And I would even say like even if let's say instead I had Mud Dragon in the Swamp, right? Super Poly can fuse the Griffin, right? The Adventure Griffin, with Battle Butler because the Adventure Griffin is a Winged Beast and the Battle Butler is a Wind Thunder, right? So you can actually fuse those into Mud Dragon. It did not come up. I didn't need to do that, but that is an option that you could do, right? And also, Mud Dragon is great because you can with Super Poly you can fuse Barone, which is a Wind Warrior, with the Griffin, which is a Wind Wing Beast. So yeah, Super Poly was absolutely amazing. I resolved it like 4 or 5 times, and every time I did, I basically won the game. I never bricked on it. Like I never drew too many of these. Like yeah, it sucks that you have to discard a card. Like Dark Magician does not like to discard cards. Like we're not a deck that likes sending stuff to the graveyard. Um, and yeah, technically, if you draw 2 in your hand, you can play 1 and discard the other. Sure. But I don't know, I felt like I saw these just as often as I needed to. Like there were games where I didn't know the matchup. It was against Fluanderies, right? It's like what the hell, you can't really do Super Poly against Fluanderies. So in that game, I just happened to not see it because I only had 2 copies in my deck. Like maybe you might say I got lucky, right? But yeah, this card is amazing, and I absolutely recommend if you are playing Dark Magician deck, this should be a core part of the deck now because at least 2 copies. If you want to run a third, go for it. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but 2 was plenty for me. But yeah, definitely run, the 4 fusion targets I mentioned: Starving, Dragostapelia, Mud Dragon, and the Weather Washer. I guess you could do Rocket Ride as well, since Rocket Ride can attack directly. Um, but yeah, I mean the Weather Washer is just a 2K beaters. It's slightly harder for them to out. Like if you Super Poly on their turn, right? So yeah, Super Poly was amazing. Absolutely MVP card. Yeah, so in ranking, I would say in terms of like effectiveness, Super Poly was the most effective, followed by Skill Drain, followed by Droll, followed by Chalice in terms of like their impact, which you can kind of expect, right? Like Chalice just negates one monster, doesn't remove it from the field. Droll is like a hand trap floodgate, like so you can. But I ended up thinking that Skill Drain was better. I mean, maybe because I saw Skill Drain more often because this is at 3. So I'm gonna see if I drop this to 2 and make it a third Droll. Maybe I'll see Droll more, and maybe I'll realize, oh, Droll is actually like a higher impact than I realized. So yeah, absolutely great. So definitely, I would say run these now. Especially if you don't like my trap matchup. I mean, there were games where I missed Gozen Match. Like I was against a Prank Kids player going first. Like, and actually the game where I lost against Prank Kids, in the top 8 cutoff to go into top 4. My opening board was like Dragoon Chalice, which is not great. If it was Dragoon Gozen, I think I would have won, honestly. Like, remember I used to have Gozen Match? Gozen Match obliterates Prank Kids, right? Like, their only out to it is getting the Draco back to bounce it, right? Like, they have no other outs to it unless they, like, side deck. Again, this is game 1. They didn't have back row removal inherent, right? So yeah, if this was Gozen Match, I may have been able to make top 4 and gotten an invitation to Worlds. I'm just thinking like, let's see, in the other games where the one game where I used this against a DPE, I guess I prevented a Dragoon from being destroyed for 1 turn. So I guess in that case, Chalice would have been more useful. But I swear in other games that I played, a Gozen Match would have been way more useful than a Chalice. But that's also true about like Droll would have been more useful too. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, so yeah, I played 2 tournaments. Top 8 in the first, which was a world qualifier, and then top 2 in the second. In the top 2 tournament, I only lost to a Grand Maju deck, which caught me totally by surprise. I'm surprised Grand Maju is still playing, given that their Pot of Desires at 1, right? But they were able to make it work, caught me by surprise. But yeah, I beat like I'm basically 50% win rate against adventure pranks. Um, with my main losses being like in the 2 games against in that final match. I played 3 prank kids uh, matchups in the first locals tournament. Like adventure prank kids are everywhere. So after the dust settled and they went to top 4, oh, who got the world's invitations? The top 4 was in no particular order. Invoked DPE, yeah, there was still an Invoked deck playing. He managed to get top 4, which is funny because I never played him, but I feel like if I had, I would have been able to make top 4 because Super Poly wrecks Invoke DPE. It absolutely wrecks. And like Skill Drain, it's like nice mecha, but bro, like it does nothing, right? So I think if I would have gone against the Invoke player instead, I think I would have had a much easier time, especially since like Dragoon is a way better boss monster than Mechaba or DPE, right? So I think I could have won that. Anyway, so the top 4 where there was an Invoke DP player, 1 Adventure Prank Kids, which is the guy I lost to, even though I swear like half the players I played like were Adventure Prank Kids. Like there's so many of them that I saw in Swiss. By the way, there were I want to say 3 or 4 total Dark Magician decks that I saw at my locals, which is the highest I've ever seen, and mine made it the furthest. Like I got in the top 8, and no other Dark Magician deck made out of Swiss. I will say, like having seen some of the other players, like some of the other Dark Magician players were running Timaeus, which is no bueno, and like some of the other cards that I talked about in my other videos that I said like were not worth it, right? Anyway, yeah, so top 4, Invoke DPE, Sword Soul, like Tenny Sword Soul, Hulk deck, the Adventure Pranks, and then the 4th deck was a what was it? It was an adventure virtual world punk deck or whatever, some whatever. But yeah, so that was the top 4 at my locals, and then like the top 8, I was in the top 8. Like there's Dark Magician deck. I think there was the bird guy that I beat. Or no wait, yeah, the bird guy that I played that I super polyed his downerd. Yeah, he was in the top 8, but he lost as well. Like yeah, there was a number of good decks. And then it's funny because like people say, oh, Invoke DP is dead. Like you barely see Invoke DP in the second locals I went to. The top, so I was top 2, right? The top first place player was an Invoke DP player, which I didn't even play. Like it was one of those tournaments where like once you get to a certain top, like you just don't bother playing anymore. I think I could have beaten him because of Super Poly, but yeah, he got top 1. So top 1 was Invoke player, and then I was number 2, right? in terms of like the records and stuff. So yeah, Invoke DP not entirely dead yet. I mean, it only got hit like Fusion Destiny 2 and a Dear Servant to 2, both of which I believe will be going to 1 next ban list. But yeah, very few Scythe. I played against one player that had Scythe, and I was able to. Oh yeah, that was the other time I had a Chalice. Yeah, I did play against a Pendulum player who did have Scythe, and I did stop it with Chalice. Yeah, that was the other time. I guess it wasn't so memorable because like the rest of his board was like super weak. It was a Pendulum player. Like I don't know. I just feel like Pendulums are not as good as other decks. But anyway, yeah. So just something to keep in mind. Keep these. These are still kind of debatable slash optional, but I would definitely swap this to a Droll over a Chalice, especially if you're not seeing very many Scythe decks, which I haven't. There aren't, surprisingly, weren't that many. But if you do run into Scythe all the time, maybe keep your third Chalice. Is what I would say. So, yeah. So I'm pretty convinced that like other than that, the consistency of the core engine of the Dark Magician deck is still really strong. Obviously these are the support cards. I never ran into any issues with my Dark Magician. One more hilarious interaction that I did with Super Poly. So I had a board with Dragoon, Eternal Soul, Dark Magical Circle, whatever, Dark Magician Graveyard, and I had Super Poly set. I was against a Pendulum player. Yeah, the same Pendulum guy. It was a different game than the one where I chaliced his Scythe, but he saw like so he got I used Dark Magical Circle. Already I used Dragoon Negate. I had a set Super Poly, and what I did was he summons Dark Rebellion Requiem Dragon or Xyz. There's a rank 4 dragon. It's like Arc Rebellion or Dark. I forgot what it's called. But it's a beater. It's a big beater that can get over Dragoon because it can become like 5,000 attack. I forget exactly what it's called, but I think you know what I'm talking about, right? It's a Dark Dragon Xyz monster. Yeah, and I still happen to have the Dark Magician on my field. Because of Eternal Soul, like I used Rod to tribute Dark Magician Girl instead of Dark Magician. And then when he went into battle phase to try to beat over my Dragoon, I flipped Super Poly, fused my Dark Magician with his Arc Rebellion or Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon or whatever, and I made a second Dragoon. So yeah, this can make Dragoon, guys. If you're against a Dragon Link player or like, I don't know, I guess Based is that base deck that people are talking about, that one YCS, like, also runs dragons. Maybe you could Super Poly one of their dragons with your Dark Magician to make Dragoon. Just saying, like, it was a funny thing that came up. Like, I wasn't expecting to make a second Dragoon off that. I was just expecting to use this to, like, clear 2 of their dark, because Pendulums have a lot of dark monsters, right? Oh, just clear 2 of their dark monsters to make Starving Venom or Dragos Tapali or whatever, right? But then when I saw, oh, your dark monster's a dragon, and I have a Dark Magician, I'm just going to make a second Dragoon. So I made 2 Dragoons against that dude, and he was just, like, blown away. Like, nothing you could do about that. So yeah, Super Poly, absolutely run. This is a great format to be playing Super Poly. So please run that. So, anyway, hope y'all enjoy the recap. I'll probably be playtesting more. Part of me does kind of want to switch and play a little bit of Flandres because I saw very few Flandres players this last weekend. I saw one Flandres player, and I felt his deck profile, his deck was not very good. And yeah, I don't know, like, there were Lancias around, but there weren't that many. I just feel like I want to play my Flandres deck a little bit, just to see if I can, like, do some shenanigans with it. But yeah, I'll still be playtesting this online. I'll be participating in some online tournaments, like the Dragon Rider tournament I'll be playing in. So yeah, so I'll definitely be talking more about Dark Magician, but I do want to just switch gears a little bit and like play a little bit some of the other stuff. I've also been looking into an invoked Dark Magician deck that uses Alistair as normal summon instead of Magician's Rod, like to make Mechaba and Dragoon. So yeah, maybe I'll put out a deck profile for that. Stay tuned. I haven't been playing around with that, but yeah, hopefully I'll learn something here, and then maybe this can help you in your decision making for what like 10 cards you want to tech into your Dark Magician for supporting your main engine. Anyway, all right, thanks for watching. Have a good one, and see you in the next video.